Blessings. Welcome to today's Law Enforcement Daily Devotional. Today we're starting in Jeremiah, and our read was chapters 1 through 3, and I hope you were able to get those read ahead of time. Good stuff in today's read. I've always equated Jeremiah to a law enforcement officer, and I think you'll see why, because of God's unique calling on his life. And we also see that type of calling on our lives as modern day law enforcement officers. And it starts right at the very beginning in chapter 1, verse 5. It says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." Now, God is obviously talking directly to Jeremiah in this. He's not talking to law enforcement. But it is easy, and I don't think it is too far of a stretch for us to apply this to our lives. Because before God formed any of us in the womb, He knew us. And if you're a Christian in law enforcement, in this ministry of law enforcement, then you're set apart, just like Jeremiah was. So it's not that far of a stretch for us to put ourselves in these verses. Um, Romans 1:1, Paul says, "I, Paul, an apostle, are called as an apostle and set apart for the ministry." We also use that verse to look at a Christian peace officer's role in society and how God has called us into this job to be a minister to our communities and to those around us. So this lines up really well with that. You've got an Old Testament and a New Testament that both line up with our calling and being appointed and set apart for the ministry. In verse 6 through 8, to me, this kind of reinforces that calling. He says there are no excuses. If you've got this calling from God, then you are required to act on it. We have to obey the things that God calls us to. And if that's being a law enforcement officer, then you're a minister in law enforcement. You're a minister to your communities, your coworkers, your jurisdictions. Uh, you know, we see people at their worst times when they're spiritually, physically bankrupt, when they're reaching out and they have no answers and they're at their wits' end. We can share hope with these people. Uh, we can feed the poor and clothe the naked. We can do the things that the Bible calls Christians to do. But as a law enforcement officer, we have more access to the people who need these things and the people that the Bible calls the widows and orphans, the oppressed and the afflicted. We have more access to them than the common person does. And because we have more access, I think we have more responsibility. But in Jeremiah 1:10, there's several things that just, again, line up with law enforcement. Jeremiah was called to, number one, to pluck up and to break down. Number two, to destroy and overthrow. And number three, to build and to plant. So I took a little time, really looked at these, studied it, and here's what I came up with. Do we pluck up as Christian peace officers? Uh, do we take kids away from drug addicts and criminals and put them in child protective services? Yes, we do. Um, do we break down? Do we break down crack houses and chop shops and prostitution rings? Do we break those down? Yes, we do. Um, do we destroy by using deadly force as an absolute last option? Yes, we do. Do we overthrow bullies and criminal empires and drug lords? Yes, we do. Do we build when we rescue a family from an abusive lifestyle? When we help a child or steer a teenager from the wrong path? when we encourage a kid? Yes, we do. Do we plant seeds of justice, righteousness, and peace? Man, I hope so, because that's what we do. We're law enforcement. And if you heard this and you don't do any of those things, then this is a wake-up call for you, just the same as it was for Jeremiah. This is the beginning of Jeremiah's ministry. And if you answered no or don't think you're involved in these, it can be the beginning of your ministry. Don't take this as a dig on you, because some of those things you may not be involved in the moment. If you get the opportunity as a law enforcement officer, I think you would take it, and we do these things. So it is a fantastic beginning to Jeremiah for us as law enforcement. And I think there's going to be a lot of good takeaways for us as we move forward into this. So tomorrow, read ahead. We're going to be in Jeremiah 4, 5, and 6. It looks to be a good read. So come back here ready to study. And in the meantime, be safe.